Welcome to the smartest people in the room. We are glad you are here, and just by showing up, you are already demonstrating your very own smarts. Today, I'm pleased to present two people who are working very hard to help artists get paid more money and do so more efficiently in today's very challenging music business. I promise you will leave smarter and more enlightened than you arrived. Before we get started, please let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. I run the music practice at Turnkey ZRG, and I place music executives in roles throughout the industry. So by definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, share your LinkedIn profile, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones, and ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of those as possible during the interview. Also, please make sure your chat is set to address everyone, not just the host and speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors, for without their support, we could not do this for free. Special thanks to First Horizon Bank, Turnkey ZRG, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, MedJet, Tennessee Brew Works, Project Music, and Better Than Booze. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Cliff Fluet. Cliff joined Lewis Silkin LLP as partner in April 2006 after qualifying at CMS and then spending a decade as in-house counsel in music and broadcasting. He specializes in digital media, brand entertainment, technology, and innovation, and is joint head and founder of the media and entertainment practice at Lewis & Silkin and sits in the firm's board responsible for innovation. He's named in the Legal 500 as a leader and expert in his field and is ranked as part of their Hall of Fame for music and digital. As a partner at Lewis Silkin, he acts for some of the world's largest names in the digital music, brands, and advertising industries and social on content rights and innovation technologies. He's also managing director at 11, offering strategic and commercial advisory services as part of the ecosystem of trusted partners to companies in the realm of audiovisual, music, digital media, esports, and film, with focus on AI, blockchain, and immersive entertainment. Cliff, welcome. It is an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
And joining him as today's featured guest is Peter Harvey. Peter is co-founder and CEO of RoyFi Inc., a fintech company that partners with distributors, publishers, labels, societies to provide flexible financial solutions to rights holders. RoyFi believes creatives deserve access to the same financial resources as other businesses and is committed to providing its clients with the lowest rates and the most transparent terms in the industry. Prior to co-founding RoyFi, Peter was a consultant and head of research at Capital Cities LLC in Indianapolis, Indiana, where his primary responsibilities included leading research for $30 billion of public and private retirement plans, endowments, university operating funds, foundations, and wealthy families, conducting investment manager due diligence and ongoing monitoring, performing primary economic and capital market research. Prior to Capital Cities, he's a portfolio manager and investment analyst for a $5 billion single-family office where he developed their global macro multi-asset allocation and led all investment manager searches, due diligence, and monitoring. Peter earned his AB at economics and MBA with concentrations in finance and marketing at Rollins College. It is an honor to welcome these two rock stars to our platform. Take it away, boys.
Thank you, Tom.
Hi, really excited to be here. And as I said, I'm the vertical Peter by the looks of it. I shall identify as this. But I'm going to kick off because Peter is the true rock star here. But you're not from the music business, as we've heard from your background. I'd really love to hear more about your background and why and how you came to this crazy business of show.
Yeah, thanks, Cliff. Based on bios, I think I should probably be interviewing you, but alas, here we are. So, I came to music probably through one of the more interesting back channels. With some of my institutional clients, one state pension in particular, I was investing in intellectual property rights in the pharmaceutical industry. So. We were acquiring catalog from research scientists that had developed and patented a therapeutic. This will sound somewhat familiar to the music industry as I go through it, but the way that the pharmaceutical industry works is a research scientist is working at a university. They will create a therapeutic. They will generate some level of efficacy, and then they'll say, okay, there's something here, but we don't have the multi-billion dollars that it takes to get a drug through FDA approval and into market. So what they say is, okay, we're going to patent this, and we're going to sell this patent on to one of the pharmaceutical companies that's going to go through that process and put a ton of money behind it, get it through the approval process, get it in market, distributing, and then all of a sudden, they have a royalty off of that. So every pill that's sold, every prescription that's written and filled, that research scientist will get a small royalty payment. Sounds kind of familiar to the music industry, right? Artists put music out, they distribute it, and then all of a sudden, they generate some royalties, and you've got an asset that's of a lot of value right there. So did a ton of work in the pharmaceutical space, and then the Ontario Teachers Pension came in and said, we really like this as well, and we've got a lot of money, and basically bought up all of the market. Any rights that were coming to market, they became the highest bid. So I said, okay, well, this opportunity is no longer there. I love music. What do music rights look like? What started looking into funds that were acquiring rights, and say, okay, that's really interesting. The economics make sense. You've got copyrights versus patents. Copyrights have a lot longer life. The rights themselves take a lot less money to distribute than a pharmaceutical. Okay, so it's more efficient from a capital perspective, and people tend to listen to music, and their tastes may ebb and flow. But generally speaking, once you're in a playlist, people are going to continue to listen to you. So like, okay, this is really interesting, and started to say, okay, what is the next level here? Who's being helped by us providing the money to exit, really your life's work? And all of a sudden, it's you think about it and say, oh, well, it's the top 1% of rights holders that are really doing the transactions of meaning that are meaningful, and selling their catalog for really life altering money. So it's like, okay, well, who's that helping? And it's like it's all well and good to to provide a liquidity event to Katy Perry, but does that help the songwriters? Does that help the band members? Does that help the next group of artists that are going to produce the songs that we love? And I think the answer that we got to was no, it doesn't. It's a great exit for the absolute, the people that don't really need the help. They said, okay, well, what if we were just a money provider to the industry? What's out there? So we did an analysis of the other companies that were providing music or money to music rights holders, both publishing and master. And we said, okay, well, there are a couple companies that will give you some money, but why does it cost so much? And we couldn't square that answer with anything, or square that question with any answer other than because we can get away with it. And that was our aha moment of, hey, there's something here. If we understand the risk that's associated with providing money to rights holders, then we can price that accordingly, and we can build a much better model that actually helps people move forward and doesn't sit there and say, hey, you have to hit a grand slam with this money, otherwise you're going to be up the creek. So that's
Um,
kind of the long and the short of how I got here. Maybe a little bit of background on you, Cliff, and exactly how you got to where you're at, and you know, maybe a little bit about the journey, because I think you've seen one or two things along the way.
I've seen one or two things along the way. I mean, so my background, and I'm not going to rehearse the wonderful bio that I had no idea that Tom was going to read out verbatim. So my background is I originally qualified as a lawyer, started my legal career as a trainee 30 years ago, qualified into real estate of all things, lasted a full 6 months as a qualified real estate lawyer before going into the music industry. So that was back in 96 in the pre-internet era. Then the internet arrived. So I was at a major label. That was a fascinating period from 96 to 2001. Then I chose to leave because I thought that the industry really needed to change its model and I could probably be of the most help on the outside. So I went into broadcast and narrowcasting, as it used to be called, working with Europe's largest pure play commercial radio group. And then after a decade as an in-house lawyer, I was getting really frustrated. I couldn't find any lawyers that were thinking strategically, multilaterally from a commercial and business perspective. And I was complaining to one of the law firms that I used that I couldn't find any strategic advice. I was just finding degrees of no and getting charged for it. And I said, well, why don't you set up your own practice? So in the early days, I worked in the world of mobile. So working with companies like Nokia and BlackBerry, ask your parents. Then with Apple and Samsung, and then I got into the streaming era, working with most of the big streaming companies, then worked into social, etc., etc. And then about 10 years ago, I decided to pivot and identify as legal curious, where I really wanted to get on the advisory side. So it's very different in the US. In the US, the first guys you go and see a lawyer. In the UK, this are the last people that you go and see. It's like going to the dentist, right? They go late and slow and resenting every penny that is paid. So the moment I identified as a strategic advisor, I started working with some really, really interesting companies. And one of my first clients that I worked with was the world's first generative AI company. I'm sure we'll come back to that later. And then really about new models and new business paradigms, which is what I'm really interested in. My whole thing is being at the cutting edge of downloads and peer-to-peer and then social and then mobile and UGC and brand. And I've realized the only growth business is change. And the music industry, as much as it doesn't like change, and much as all of the antibodies want to kill it, and then come back to the other issue as well, which is just a personal obsession of mine, is getting people paid. Spoiler alert, having worked in business affairs at a major label, it wasn't always your first priority to ensure that, you pay the artist in as fair and equitable and transparent a way as the market requests or insists that you do right now. So really a lot of the issues are sort of joining those dots. I see myself as a professional joiner of dots. I love being curious. And as much as this industry beats me down, I try and retain a sunny and happy demeanor. But look, Peter, I mean, as someone who that outsider coming in, I want you to give me a really good thing and a really bad thing about what surprised you most about the music industry.
I think we'll start with the good, and then we'll just touch on the bad. We'll throw it away. But I think the good is the people, and most specifically the creators. That's why we started the company, and that's been the biggest affirmation was, hey, you've got some really, really creative people that are really talented, that are genuinely good people. How can we help them? And I would say that was a thesis coming into this, was that give all the artists the benefit of the doubt that they are the people that you want to work with and that they do genuinely love it. And I can't be more happy than I am to have actually experienced that and worked with these artists. And I have personal relationships with most of our clients at this point in time, because it's a financial transaction and you get to know people and you get to understand what it is that they want to do, and they're just really, really good people that are looking for help. I think they just need resources, and all that they really want to do is make art. They want to make art mainly for them because it's what they love to do, and that's how they fill their energy, and they fuel their battery is putting out this great art that other people then consume. And it kind of becomes this really nice self-fulfilling prophecy for them. And that's been the best part about it is, I've got artists that we've worked with now for 3 years that call me up on a Saturday and say, hey, I'm considering this deal. What do you think? Or, hey, I'm looking, looking to buy a new house. What do you think about this? And I couldn't be happier that, that these genuinely good people are in these positions where they have, those types of decisions to make. And I couldn't be happier that they're calling me up to ask my opinion, whether it's qualified or not. I think the bad part is, that the stigma of the industry by and large is deserved. I would say that, there's a lot of the industry that still operates on a because we can mode, and some of the deals that get floated are genuinely not in the creator's best interest. They are fundamentally because they can get away with it, and because the person sitting on the other side of the table, signed an agreement that said that they would seek their own legal counsel. They didn't, and that isn't reason to void the contract. And there's still too many of those deals. There's too many of those deals really across the board. I think that the industry puts out a lot of deals that the industry wouldn't take, and that's one of the things that we're hoping to change a little bit. Through what we're doing at Roy-Fi is providing at least ammunition to get better deals done. Allowing artists to have more choices, allowing songwriters to have more choices where they can, make an informed decision, or they have the resources up front to, pay for a lawyer to review a contract versus just signing it because they don't have any other option. So I would say that's the bad, but I think the good far outweighs it at the end of the day. It's, I think that all of us are in the music industry because we love music. I think that goes with, if you don't love music, first and foremost, I'm sorry. And second of all, if you don't love music and you're working in the music industry, why are you here? So I think that all goes without saying, but I think that we can do better by the artists.
Very good. Very, very good. And, one thing that, I would be interested, again, you're a financial guy, but there's lots of people who say, oh, the music industry is exactly the same. It's all about art. It's all about finding the best, etc. But our business model has undertaken a fundamental rewrite over the last 15, 20 years. But those models for monetization, they don't seem to have changed that much. I mean, how do you see that problem?
Well, it's a really interesting one, right? The music industry right now, I think for the most part, what we talk about when we say the music industry, we talk a lot about streaming. We don't use the music industry as a proxy for live. I think live is its own beast. Direct to fan is its own beast. But if we think about just the recorded music industry, what we have to understand is that streaming is still really early on in its life cycle. You've got a number of competitors that are all fighting for market share right now, and they're all really scared to raise prices dramatically because they don't want to lose their position from a market share perspective. So until that matures, I think that we're going to kind of be sitting here saying, well, artists are being underpaid, or artists need, it's really tough to monetize your streaming. And the reality is it's just an immature market. And I think that it's pretty safe to say that we're all underpaying for our recorded music. I think, paying $15 to $20 to $25 a month is, based on the breadth of what we have. Most people would pay significantly more. And if they wouldn't pay significantly more, they would maybe pay for, what they're currently paying for an ad light model. So I think that there's a lot of room for the overall revenue of the industry to increase. So that then becomes a question of like, okay, what's the model? How are we going to monetize that? And it's tough. I mean, there's so many competing forces right now where you've got, some people want, fan powered royalties. Some people love the market share model. I don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. It works for some. Each model works better for some small group, and I think that we're going to have some sort of a hybrid model by the end of it. But I think the one thing that we can I think all agree on is that data has never been more present and more available, which is, I think, what artists and their teams need to do a better job of mining. They need to do a better job of understanding exactly who their fans are, how to reach their fans directly, how to monetize. Because when you break down the different types of revenue streams, you got streaming, then you've got merch and touring, and then you've got direct to fan. Those are fundamentally different exploitations of the art, right? And exploitations of the fan base. And I think that we've still got a lot of work to do to improve that. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves on that, but I will say that, I think that there's a lot that's going to change over the next couple of years, as far as, different companies that are out there that are going to, be able to help artists reach their fans and engage their fans more. Because, streaming's never going to be, for a small independent artist, is never going to be enough to keep the lights on and do everything that they want to do. It's going to have to be supplemented with live, with merch, and finding your fan base, so that you can then engage that fan base and generate a living off of them by providing them something that they're willing to pay for. One area that I think is going to be very advantageous from a monetization perspective is just plugging the holes of leakage, whether that be through fraud, through infringement, through non-value added middlemen, whatever that kind of manifests itself in. I think that there's going to be a pretty significant tailwind, just as as the industry gets more efficient for creators. So I don't know if that directly answers your question, but I think that we're still, to your point, the only constant is going to be change. The only growth is going to be change, and I think we're only, we're really, really early on in this.
Totally, absolutely, Charlie.
So, if I kick it back to you and say, okay, you're a music insider, you've seen all these various different changes and iterations of the industry, what do you think is the biggest mistake or misconception about the industry, and how do you think we're gonna, obviously, fix the mistakes?
Look, I mean, on the misconception point, I have my own theory that everyone's own industry is sophisticated, and everyone else's industry is complicated. Right, so I've had no end of finance people rain dance into the music industry, say, "Oh, it's really, really complicated. I'm going to make it really, really straightforward." Right, and inherent in that, implicit in that, is you're all fucking idiots, and I'm here to save you. Yet, if you were talking about banking or oh no, that's sophisticated. So I suppose the biggest issue I would say is that the music industry is a sophisticated ecosystem. On a good day, it is a sophisticated ecosystem of rights, players operating in a quantum state, entirely interdependent, and with huge amounts of diversity and opportunity. On a bad day, it's Game of Thrones, right? Where you've got all the houses wanting to kill each other, fuck each other, or sometimes do both at the same time. And it's that failure of it to understand it at that kind of tribal nature, failure to understand the ecosystem. The other thing with that kind of complicated, sophisticated paradigm is inherent of that is that I've got no end of people that will, if I said to you, Peter, I've got a new business and it's going to disrupt the gas industry. I've no idea how gas is mined. I have no idea how it's piped. I don't know how it's priced, but I'm going to come in and save it. Right? You chuckle. But most days I have to deal with people from finance or tech that are just going to come in and say, I'm going to save your industry. I have no idea how these rights, I don't know the difference between masters and publishing. I don't understand how PROs work. I don't understand how the payment royalty flows. I'm not even going to begin to understand about payment rights and, liquidation periods and all that stuff, but I'm going to make it dead simple. So I think that whole complicated, sophisticated thing, failure to understand it, not just doing the basic elements. And look, that's where good lawyers can be really, really good, and really bad lawyers are the ones who have. We have what we call the inverted whistle over here. It's like, this is really complicated. It's going to be really expensive. And you're going to get lawyers who are comfortable with sophistication. There was one lawyer who did this presentation of all the rights that had to be cleared in order to launch a music streaming service. And it looked like this really complicated circuit diagram. And I went up to him afterwards. His name is Alex. I said, Alex, yeah, he goes, my wife's a doctor. If she was to map out how the human breathing circulatory system looked, it would look like that. He's never spoken to me again. So you can make things look really, really complicated, or actually you can understand its sophistication and be comfortable with that. And I think it's, back to a musical analogy as well. When you know how the notes work and you know how to play your instrument, you can then improvise. So I'd like to say I'm sort of jazz fusion in my area of advice.
That's super interesting because obviously, I started off coming at this from, a purely finance perspective, saying, okay, well, this doesn't make sense. And then you have to learn, exactly, to your point, all of the rights that are necessary, the flow of money, what is it that actually makes up the music industry? And yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, we'll stick with your gas analogy. I actually use an analogy when I explain royalties. I use oil wells, and I'll credit somebody who's actually on the call here, who's one of our investors and a board member, Greg Dyra, and it is that music rights are very, very similar to oil wells, right? You drill a well, you frack the well, all of a sudden it's got this huge flow. And then it kind of tails off into a steady state where it has a very predictable decline, but long tail, and that's exactly the music industry. And there's nuances, but there are at least similarities, if not general operating rules about every business that we can understand. And I still come back and I say the music industry isn't that complex. The music industry is just another industry. But what's really different about music than most other industries is that the creators of the value, which is the actual art, are so widely distributed and so disparate and so fragmented that they have almost no power. And when you have that, and I think everything's moving in the direction of artists being, treated a little bit better, having a little bit more power. That's obviously what we're trying to get behind and push for. But that's the biggest difference between this industry and every other industry that is of size, is that you have, all professional athletes have their unions, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form here advocating for a union. I want to get ahead of that one. Although there are merits, but from my perspective, music is about the music, and it's about empowering the people that create that music. And I think by and large, the industry needs to do a better job of fulfilling that role and helping lift up those that create versus figuring out exactly how they can separate them from what they've created.
Right. Well, also answering one of the questions that's sort of a residual point which chimes with that one is one of the biggest mistakes that people make about the music industry, that somehow it's a problem that wants to be solved. And lots of people, again, say, I'm going to solve the industry, I'm going to save the industry, I'm going to do this. And, and of course, what they then tend to do is try and solve it with a thing that's convenient for them. So my classic one is, what record labels want? More transparency. Let's just sit for a second there as to how much transparency a label might want. However, what a label might want to have is more data, more insight, more opportunities. But coming into there, and then just say to them, right, okay, how about we make your wallet transparent? How about we make your bedroom transparent? Transparency is not, it's always a one-way mirror when it comes to transparency with anyone doing that. I want to pick up on one of the points you mentioned earlier. So when I entered the music industry, it's like, why is it so full of fucking lawyers? I don't get this. It's like, oh, it's a rights business. But I've pompously formed my first law of copyright, which is it creates illusion of control. So copyright, unlike patents, is about making money. Patents is about making money. So that 20 years, you make as much fucking money as you want, whereas the music industry is still stuck on the control paradigm. But that obsession with IP, there is a high in curiosity about data, or data, as you would put it, or So I would come into. So I spent 5 years in music, where it's the majesty and mystery and alchemy of A&R, right? And it's about the head, it's about the heart, it's about the gut, or some other orifice, right? And data was only used to justify a decision, never inform a decision. And then I went into radio, and again, being old, we used to have literally hundreds of people hitting the phone every single day, ringing people, say, did you like Hey Ya by Cass? Did you like this? Did you like that? And it was completely data driven. Talk to me about the music industry's relationship with data, because I think that's a really unhealthy relationship right now.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. My perspective is that we've never had more data, and we've never had more data available to more people. And I think that, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what that data can do. But most of the data that artists now have, just through their distribution reports, their publishing statements, understanding where people are listening, who's listening, where they're earning their royalties from, that's data that the labels have had for decades, right? They were the only ones that had it. They didn't, they provided a PDF that was not not nearly as granular as what we have now. And I think that it's going to, I'll back up. Data and rights are, as you said, everything in the industry. They are the value. They are the way to exploit it. If you think about your rights as being the treasure, well, the data is the treasure map to help you find the treasure. And I think previously, only a few people had that map. And I think that there was a lot of what you said, where we've got A&Rs that are saying, oh, well, I just hear that, I can tell from my ear. Well, yes, to a degree, but I think it's been moving more and more towards the labels as, very significant entities and, informed businesses that are making smart decisions. They've kind of used that data, and they said, well, we're going to pull the risk off right now. They've been de-risking for decades now. The idea that you get, a $250,000 advance because somebody heard you is not the case anymore. The only way you get a $250,000 advance is if that label knows that they can make $5 million off of you. And that's I think the biggest change is, the data is driving everything for everybody, and we're no different. We're not going to put money out. We're not going to give an advance that we're not highly confident that we're going to collect both our advance plus our fee. That's just the fundamentals of the business, and it's no different at the labels. If you find a single label that is just using their ear and saying, yep, I think we got something here, and putting hundreds of thousands of dollars behind them, I'll show you a label that's probably not going to be around in a couple of years. And they're not dumb. They know what they're doing. They're making calculated investment decisions. And I think that's only going to be the case more and more and more. Because once you have all of the data that we have today, you can pinpoint exactly what it is that you're trying to target. And you can say, hey, I'm going to go do a show in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because I know that I've got 10,000 people that listen to me regularly. Well, that's huge. That's huge for Drake, all the way down to, somebody who's trying to fill a 100-seat room. And I think that's the direction that we're going. And it's the winners are going to be the ones that retain their rights while using the data to their advantage. I think that's going to be a huge thing. And when you think about, what rights are, they're controlled, but at the end of the day, they're also how you distribute the proceeds. And I would personally love to see a lot more artists retaining more rights and only giving up a share of their rights for somebody who's going to really move the needle from a monetization and growth perspective. And think about I think every artist, every songwriter should look at themselves as a small business that's doing a seed round and then a Series A and a Series B. And who are you giving? Who are you going to give options to? Who you're a founder. You started the company. You started owning the whole pie, and now who are you going to give a slice to? And how long are you going to give them that slice? And what are the terms upon which you're going to give them that slice? And I think we inherently the industry knows that artists don't think that way, but the successful ones do. And that's the really interesting thing is, the more artists get in the mindset of being their own small business, the more they're going to be able to generate their own successes and generate real success, because, it's a lot easier to set yourself up financially for both yourself and your future generations owning 50 to 80% of your catalog versus 15%, and solely living off of touring. And that model it's a really tough way to go. And yes, that cash up front is nice, getting more money than you've ever had in your life at 18 is it seems like you're really balling out, but then you realize you may never see another dime, or you may realize that you got $100,000 advance, and before you get your 15 cents, you got to generate 600K plus of revenue. And that's before we get to marketing. It's, these models are models that would sink every single business in America. Every startup, if startups worked like label deals, there would be no new companies. It's probably the best way to put it. There'd be, Google, Apple, Amazon would own all of the ideas.
But let's talk about that, because one of the things I've often said to artists and managers was, look, if I was your financial advisor, if you told me you had one share in one company with one revenue stream, right, that would be crazy. Oh, no, I need to diversify my portfolio. I need to be able to de-risk, etc., etc. Again, I don't know why, but artists and managers seem to be kind of inured to certain specific models. Now, again, 30 years ago, there was one model, which was basically a swap rights for money perspective. And even in publishing as well, that would be for pretty long retention periods as well before doing that. Now you can have every kind of deal, but also let's talk about those other forms of revenue streams. I mean, to what extent are you seeing artists understanding that kind of portfolio between merch and streaming and touring and fan? Because there still seems to be a little bit of a veneration of the monetization of the sound recording.
Yeah, well, it's the one that they can see right now and the one that they get every month. And there's a pretty significant divide from an artist perspective of the artists that are on, call it a consistent growth rate to flat decline, versus the ones that go parabolic, the old traditional bottom left, top right. And the biggest difference is understanding exactly what you're talking about, the various streams and where to put their money. And a lot of artists come to us and say, yeah, I've got this track I want to put out. I want to put some marketing behind it. And okay, that's fine. That's good. First hurdle is want to put the money in your career. That's a really good first step. But it's the ones that realize that, hey, I want to launch a project direct to my fans that I already know are here, or I want to get out on tour, that are the ones that make the stepwise changes, from call it up and coming independent artists to household name or close to household name, or kind of underground sensation. And I always say that merch and touring are the best places to put the proceeds of an advance. If you think that you can take a $20,000 advance that's going to cost you maybe $4,000 or $5,000, and you can go ahead and put that into merch that back of the napkin. Let's just say that most merch nets you, we'll conservatively say 3 times. So if you can take 20,000 and turn it into 60,000, that $5,000 or $6,000 that you pay for that 20,000 is nothing, right? That's a really, really great outcome.
It's a great return, right?
Yeah, you're able to generate multiples. And that's, the biggest problem is that, the industry focuses on your monthly listeners and your, what playlist you're on. And I think that, the artists that use the consistent income from their streaming catalog as a leverage point to then, go on and do something big with, that's direct to fan, that's super high margin. Those are the ones that are gonna make it, because as you tour, your streaming, goes up. As you tour, you can sell more merch. As you tour, you have more interaction points direct with your fan community that you can then retarget for whatever it is that you want to do on a direct to fan basis. And those are the things that actually make, a successful career. Yeah, it's great to have $100,000 of annual streaming revenue. That's objectively a very, very respectable and good living. And it's also very difficult to do. So if you can get 50,000 and then find and use that 50,000 to find your fans and engage your fans, that's going to be a far easier path to having a successful music career. Yeah.
And have you got some real life case studies of that, with artists that you've worked with or you've observed? Or
yeah, we've got an artist that I've talked about before, that was coming out of a major label deal that didn't go the way that they wanted. They were rebuilding their catalog. They only qualified for a $15,000 advance when we first got introduced, and this was over 2 years ago. That artist came to us and said, "Hey, I've got my own merch company. That's crushing it, but I need a little bit of breathing room so that I can put out more art, so that I can engage my fans again, and then, go back and, kind of keep the creative side of his business going." So he came to us. He took a $15,000 advance. We expected that to take 2 years to pay back, by the way. So our underwrite was, hey, we'll give you 15. We'll collect, let's say, the next 18 over the next 2 years. And he released a 20-part series to his fans. He engaged the fan base that he knew that he had, which is why he got signed to the major label in the first place. They listened to the new project. He recouped that advance in 4 months. So immediately he was available. He had, another $30,000 available to him. So doubled his earnings power, and was able to put out another project, buy himself more time. Over the course of a year and a half, he took 4 advances. First one started off at 15,000. Last one was 100,000. All of them are recouping in about a quarter to half the time expected. And frankly, he doesn't need us anymore. And that's like our perfect success story is, somebody who actually has a use case for the money that says, all right, I just need a little bit to kick me off. I need a little bit to keep me going. And then, okay, I've got the growth. Now let's throw some fuel on the fire. Let's do that a couple of times. And now all of a sudden, this artist has had months where they've earned $15,000 a month just from their streaming. Let's not even get into publishing. Let's not even get into their merchandise. And this is, a single artist that, just had an idea of what he wanted to do, knowledge of where his fan base was, and just needed a little bit, kind of the small starter funds to get everything rolling again. And now he owns, all of the new works. He owns 100%. They're earning incredibly well. He's got, great fan engagement, and at any point in time, he could always come back to us and easily qualify for another $100,000, $200,000 if he needs it. I don't think he's going to need it. I think that he's outgrown us. And that's exactly what we want. We want artists to come to us and say, hey, this is, here's my catalog. What can I get? Then all of a sudden you've got your budget. You can say, how can I deploy this? How can I generate a return on it? And by the way, we don't own any rights at the end of it. So, it's not like he's done another label deal. We sit there and we're money in and we collect our money. That's it. We collect our money plus a fee. And that's the entirety of the transaction. And that's on purpose. It's because it should be that simple. It's that simple for every other business, every other small business that can go, prove earnings for a couple of years, go to a bank, get a line of credit, and then just use the capital that they are clearly capable of paying back. That's a great success story. We have a ton of artists and bands that have come to us and said, hey, I just got picked up by on a stadium tour. I gotta get everything from the van to get the first couple of hotels to front loading our merch. Well, those artists, all of them have taken, again, mid-teens priced money and generated multiples on it just because they're saying, hey, I've got an opportunity to invest in myself. And that's the prime example of what we are trying to enable. It's super interesting. You brought up the point of artists and managers always being kind of stuck on one model of how much money can I get. And that's one of the first things that we tell everybody is, just because you qualify for $100,000, you shouldn't take $100,000 if you don't need it. Money costs money. Every dollar that you take from us is going to come with a fee. So if you only need $25,000, take $25,000 and then come back to us in 2 months and take the next 25,000 or the next 25,000. It really is that easy for us to kind of stack these advances so that you have what you need when you need it and you're not unduly paying. I want to ask your question about kind of the single view of that managers sometimes take, because I sometimes find that the reason that managers are always pushing for the largest dollar amount is because they don't always have they are their own businesses. Let's just say they don't always have the artist's best interest in mind. And if you can take an advance that has 5 or 10 years of future earnings, and de-risk that relationship, you will. But and I'm not asking you to comment on that. I'm asking you to comment on what you think makes a good manager, because you've seen so many different types of managers and so many different types of deals, and there is a clear difference between the managers that genuinely want to see their artists succeed and the managers that are just here clipping coupons. And I'm kind of throwing that to you because you've seen it all.
I'm really happy to do that. I mean, I think that the artist-manager relationship, it's so important, it's so precious, but in many ways it's so unhealthy in many ways. So I'm very good friends with a guy who happens to manage one of the biggest bands in the world. He's managed them for over 30 years. He's pulled off industry deals that people write papers about and essays about for them. Every time one of the band calls, there is a look of fear. I was supposed to wonder, and I've worked it out. These are my words, not his. Every call is him thinking he might get fired, right? And that's not a kind of a question of tail commission or whatever. I think to a certain extent there's a bit of that. So I think also as well, managers are increasingly, the artist managers I speak to say, the label expect us to do the social, the PR, the advertising, the distribution, the blah, 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 and they're not getting paid. They're not getting the advances. They're not getting the upfront. They're only ever getting their element they can commission on as well. And actually you see that, it's like bands that split the publishing 4 ways and, they tend to last a really, really long time because you take that off the table and then it becomes much more about the art. I think that if there are ways where managers can have a genuine and deep involvement, lots of people say to me, why would a young artist, I don't want, if there's anyone on the call as well, why would a young artist like Justin Bieber, who might live another 60 years, take 20 times revenue? Well, the people around him are going to get a life-changing amount in one go. What are they incentivized to do? So I think that, like many things in life, alignment, realignment of incentives to a win-win and taking a much longer, broader view. If artists and managers can have a much longer view as well. I mean, I've spoken to companies. I said, why don't you become a shareholder? Oh no, we couldn't possibly do that. So, okay, so you can take 20% of their gross revenue for life, but you can't enter a grown-up relationship with the business becoming a shareholder. Well, I might get fired. They might kick me off the board. I need the articles, and then it goes. So I just think we all need to really revisit these opportunities to be able to say, you know what, we can turn this into a win-win. Peter, one thing you and I have just rabbited away. I just wondered whether or not there's any questions. I don't have the Q&A box open, but I was just wondering whether or not there were any. Oh no, we've got someone checking if they're in.
I have one, guys. This is Tom.
Hi, Tom.
Peter, can you walk us through a real example? Obviously not naming names, but I'm a songwriter or an artist. I need like that $100,000 to go out on tour and buy my merch. Exactly what's the process? What do I got to do to get the money, and how does it all work mechanically?
Yeah, it's super easy. So you can either contact us directly if you come across myself or any of the team, and simply say, hey, I'm interested in knowing what my availability is, or you can just go to our website royfi.com and apply for an advance. What we're going to do then is we're going to simply say, hey, can you provide us the last year to 3 years of your royalty statements? We're going to take those in, we're going to analyze them, and we'll come back to you and say, hey, you've got $100,000 available to you. Maybe we say it's $100,000 on a 2-year advance. We'll say that our fee is going to be $30,000. So what we're going to then do is we say, hey, we're going to give you $100,000. We're going to collect the next $130,000, assuming that it goes up to the full 2 years or longer to recoup. That $30,000 fee can never increase. If you pay it back faster, though, we have options baked in to our deals that automatically reduce our fee. So say you pay that back in 1 year, think about it, we'll reduce our fee to $15,000 is the example there. But it's really streamlined. So, once we have those statements, we make the offer, you either accept it, deny it, respond to our email, don't respond to our email, say, hey, what are the other options? I only need $20,000. Can I do this as a 6-month advance, or can I do this as 25% of my catalog and I still receive 75% of each royalty run? We can do all of those. Those are all very flexible terms that we have. But you say that you accept it, we're going to send you the agreement. It's very simple. Again, we're going to give you $100,000. Our fee is $30,000. We're going to collect the next $130,000, except for these other options if you hit them. And then we're going to go to we're going to get a letter of direction with the entity that's paying your royalties. And that's, I think, the reason why we say that these are very low risk is I'm not saying to the artist that they have to pay me back. I'm saying that we will get paid back from your catalog. And we'll get paid back directly. So if it's from BMI or ASCAP or your DistroKid or your Symphonic or wherever you distribute, it could be from your label as well if you're recouped. And it's just that simple. We're going to give you the $100,000, and then your royalty stream is going to be redirected to us until we've recouped the $130,000. And it's really that simple. At any point in time, along the way, you can come to us and say, do I have any additional availability? I've got, this other project that I want to work on. And, as long as your catalog is performing to, what our expectation of it was, then the answer is almost 100% of the time. Yes, you do have additional availability, because we give the credit for those early recoupments for each subsequent advance. So, if you want to do a new advance 6 months after your first advance, we treat it as though your advance had recouped at 6 months, and we reduce our fee to the fee it would have been if we had only done a 6-month advance. So it's from that perspective, it's generally we can get an answer about what we can do within a day or two, and then the pinch point is really, how long does it take to get the assignment in place with whoever's paying your royalties?
And it's just on the royalties. In other words, it's not all income streams from touring.
Correct.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And, and we don't, and I think another important thing is that these aren't loans. So we're not using the catalog as collateral. If the advance doesn't perform the way that we expect, there's no situation where we can foreclose on the catalog and say, hey, we're going to take your rights away from you. That's a really important, model or element of our model, because, our view is that these rights are the single most important thing and valuable thing that artists are creating. And in order to build that catalog to the point where, you can retire on it, your kids can retire on it, you have to own it. And if you trip yourself up in one deal early on, we don't think that's a reason for you to basically lose your retirement.
Great. Cliff, I have one question for you. Since you've been in the business for about 25 years, what would you tell the 25-year-old Cliff Fluet who was considering getting into the music industry? What advice would you give that young lad?
Try not to work with Morrissey. No, the serious answer. Look, I mean, I've had an extraordinary time. I hope it's not over yet. I think the thing that I would just say is that, as ever, there's so many things. In my time, I was told that music would never be legal online, would never be legal on mobile, never legal on streaming. I'm hearing it now with regard to AI. I'm hearing it in relation to voice models. I'm hearing it in relation to whatever. So I think that really the question I would just say is just keep asking these really awkward questions. There's often a reason why, and there is often no good answer to why not. And really what we need to do is just be a lot more creative. For a business that adores and wonders creativity as well, we have to get more creative in our licensing. We have to get more creative in our financial dealings. We've got to get more creative.
Got it. Okay. Well, listen, we're about out of time, guys. And I just want to thank you for spending this hour with us. I know the audience has enjoyed it. I've been thoroughly entertained listening to the stories and learning about Roy-Fi and how your business works, Peter. Kudos on you. Sounds like a very artist-friendly offering, and our industry doesn't really have a lot of that. So good on you. To the audience, I promised you'd leave today inspired and enlightened. I think we've delivered on that promise. And I would simply say thank you for coming. Come back next Thursday at the same time. You'll get a different cast of characters, but a lot of wisdom and a lot of inspiration. And with that, just be nice to everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Peace out.
Bye.
Bye-bye.